Welcome back to Lafayette Returns, a historic Rockford podcast released monthly leading up to Lafayette Day at Rockford, Monday, July 28th, 2025. I'm your host, Lisa Landis-Blowers. This month, the focus is on music and welcoming the nation's guest. Our special guest is Christina McSherry. Christina is Executive Director at Historic Rockford and Adjunct Assistant Professor of Anthropology at Franklin and Marshall College. I started by asking her how the Lafayette Tour of America in 1825 influenced the musical landscape of the United States.
Well, it really gave everyone a chance to compose new pieces. It was something that people really rallied around. And if you could picture every major musician and every poet all composing about the same event, and I don't think we see anything like that really today. Everywhere he went, there were new pieces, whether they were informal or formal and published, adaptations of existing music, every single place he went. So it really sort of unified people around a single event, and the music was used to do that.
We've mentioned in numerous episodes that he was a rock star, but I don't think everyone understands the magnitude of his visit. I'm assuming musicians and other creative types were probably creating something, putting something together to share with him, to welcome him and honor him.
Yeah, it's sort of, we do it at a much more global and grand scale now. But like when you open up TikTok or social media and everyone's talking about the exact same event, or maybe similar to the Taylor Swift Eras tour, right? Like when that was going around the US or when it was in Philadelphia, I'd see it and every single piece of social media was about this and a clip of one of her songs or something like that. It was that type of scale for the communities at the time. And it wasn't just one artist. It was all of the musicians, and they were commissioning pieces, and they were all written in honor of Lafayette because they had different types of media then. Music was one of the primary ones that was transportable because you have paintings and you have art, you have things that are a little bit more stationary. So what's the portable commemoration that is going around and being transported? It's the music and the dancing and those kind of things. Yeah, it was definitely that sort of level of like a viral social media post that we would think of today, but on the scale of 1824 and the places Lafayette was visiting, and without the internet.
So true. So interesting. Now, were there any specific pieces or musical compositions that were directly associated with his tour?
Yes. So there were an awful lot of them. Honestly, too many to talk about. I currently have a spreadsheet of over 80 pieces that were either adapted or written specifically for these events. They range from pieces that were written by professional musicians and published and performed, and we have marches and dances and all of these things, to someone adapted a known folk song and wrote new lyrics to it and sang it to, there's one, and I forget where he was on the tour. It wasn't Lancaster, but there's one news article where there's like a guy got a little bit inebriated, composed a song off the fly at the tavern for Lafayette. So it really runs that full gambit of, sort of super traditional and composed and what we think of a musical composer to like, off the cuff, I'm going to sing a new song. And like I said, I have about 80 pieces in the spreadsheet so far. We're trying to pull them together and see which ones we can still find music for or be able to perform.
And do we have any records of what music was used here in Lancaster?
We do. Unfortunately, it's not as detailed as some of the other local accounts. Sometimes the local accounts will actually publish the words to the rewritten songs. I guess I would say what we have from Lancaster, I don't think was probably the only music that was performed for Lafayette at Lancaster, because we do know he was at some of these events. We do know we had parades. There was likely some music there, but in the newspaper account on August 2nd of 1825, there's two references to specific music, and both of these were when he visited the Lancaster School. So as he arrived, there was a chorus of the children singing. Everyone that was there performed a song called Welcome, or Lafayette's Welcome. and the audience joined in on the chorus. We don't know what that tune was. I'm still trying to track it down because almost all the songs have very similar titles. So Lafayette's Welcome, is it the same as the Lafayette's Welcome that was performed at another site? I'm not sure, because a lot of these were very local unless they were by famous composers. So it might have been composed by someone at the school. It's hard to say because they don't tell me who composed it. It might be a song that was performed elsewhere, or it might have been a local version of it.
Yeah.
But those are the two specific references we have. But I would imagine there was probably more music going on at the festivities than just those two.
So it really would have varied according to region.
Styles didn't, interestingly, but specific pieces did. There was a lot of local composing, actually by women, which is rather interesting. But we don't often have their names. It's by a lady or something like that, because they wouldn't associate their name with composing typically at that time, or often. We see that sometimes, but that wasn't always very common. So it would be, you know, like Jane Austen, she published by a lady first, right, before we knew her name. So some of these were very locally composed, and it's like, it's Lafayette's Welcome by a lady, and that was, you know, someone local composed that. But then we also have the national level ones that were composed and published. The ones that were also specifically local tended to be adaptations of existing tunes. So the Star Spangled Banner, before the Star Spangled Banner was the Star Spangled Banner, was a traditional song. It was an English song, tune, and then we put Francis Scott Key's words to it. Well, that was very common because you could have the published music to the famous song, and then it could be adapted super easily. You could put in the newspaper new words to this tune, and then people could know the new song. And that's essentially what we did to get the Star Spangled Banner. But they did that to that same tune for Lafayette. There's at least 4 or 5 songs that were published in the newspaper, new tunes to the folk tune. It's to the tune of the Star Spangled Banner, or, you know, other traditional songs. I think there's one to like Greensleeves. Different tunes that would have been popular, and those were super local. They showed up in the newspaper like a week before he attended, or they show up after, and they say, you know, this song was performed, it's an adaptation, so it looks like a poem in the newspaper, but if you read the sort of fine print at the top, it says, to be sung to the tune of, and then it's an existing known sort of folk song. So those would be very local and probably not reproduced in multiple areas that he visited around the country.
Did they have sheet music at this time?
Sort of. So we do see examples of some printed sheet music. It's not super common, and it's very new at the time. We're just getting to that level where you could mass print those kind of things. But often it would be a combination of, you know, someone in town would get it. We do see publishing houses in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia are most of where I'm seeing the published ones coming out of. You know, once someone in the community would get it, people would copy it into their own music books and things like that. But we do see actual music publishing in this period, but usually out of those big centers as opposed to locally.
Can you talk more about the styles and trends of music at this time?
So most of the Lafayette music fits into a couple different categories. We have sort of the military style music, so your marches and that kind of thing. Interestingly, in addition to standard styles, they were all performed in similar contexts as he did them around the country. So while we had regional variations in what specifically was performed, where you have the local plus the national, the sort of formula was the same. So you have the marches, those were at the parades, those were at his entrances. You have the vocal songs, those were typically performed at some sort of ceremony, like what we saw in Lancaster at the school, the ceremony of welcome at the school. They performed a song. Those are also sometimes at the dinners, or, you know, when people are in a smaller setting, the vocal ones would be performed. And then we also see dances, and those would be performed at the balls. And we see specific dances written for Lafayette to have at those balls. One of the things that's interesting is he was actually given a bound copy of a bunch of these songs, and that exists, I think, at the University of Michigan's archive. So that gets us a pretty good starting point. But a lot of these do exist today, and we do have the sheet music for them. One of the ones we recorded was Welcome the Nation's Guest, and that one was by Oliver Shaw. And that one's a military-sounding piece. So that was typically dedicated to Lafayette. just dedicated to commemorate the event, and then you also had the ones that were performed for Lafayette. And it's hard to tell which one's which unless you have the documentation of where it was performed, and we're lucky enough to have that for some of them. Welcome the Nation's Guest was actually for Providence, Rhode Island's event for Lafayette.
Do you have another piece you can share?
I do. So actually there's two pieces by the same composer. So one of the most prolific composers in this period for Lafayette music was a free black man who was a composer in Philadelphia. He composed primarily for New York's Lafayette event, which is interesting. He composed marches and dance music as well. So one of his marches is and he had his own band. That was the other component.
And is this Johnson?
And his name's Francis Johnson, yes. So the other two pieces that we've recorded are both by Francis Johnson. The first one is Honor the Brave, and it's a military band march. And this one was written for and performed by his band at the New York Lafayette event in 1824, so the year before Lancaster's, right when he arrived. And this one, we actually have the specific location this one was performed. It was at the New Theater in honor of Lafayette. And then the other piece by Francis Johnson was his New Cotillions, and those are dances in the period. They're a type of dance, and I will save the dance info for a future podcast. But music-wise, these were very popular at the Lafayette balls. Everyone would know them. They used steps that would be familiar from dancing at the period, and they were to new music. And when you see the music, it actually tells you the dance steps in it. I'm actually looking at the music right now. As I look at it, it tells me for each step what you do as part of the dance, like you promenade and you do a ladies chain, things like that. So people would know, if they had the music, how to perform the dance as well.
Are there places you recommend to go online to research this music? Maybe we want to find something from his tour and learn to play it on the piano.
There's a few resources out there. So actually, American Friends of Lafayette has pulled together 12 of the pieces on their website for the Lafayette Tour reenactment. And they have 12 pieces published with new sheet music that is free and available to use. It ranges for instruments. So they tried to put it in the instrumentation that it would have been performed in. So you have some that are vocal, some that are piano, some that are marches, that sort of thing. But a lot of these pieces are available with a little bit of work. Some are published. Johnson is probably one of the most published. If you want to perform one of Johnson's pieces, they tend to be readily available. Some of these other ones take some digging. It's combining newspapers with known songs of the period and seeing how that would work. And that's something I'm currently working on. We're hoping as part of our Lafayette event to have a concert of some of this music at some point. It's still in the planning stages, but we are hoping to bring some of this music back to life. A lot of it is held in archives. If you're lucky enough, some of those archives have digital images of it in the quality that you could perform from. So some of them are there. Other ones, I'll probably need to ask for copies, but most of them are held somewhere. The bound copy that was given to Lafayette is in, I think it's the University of Michigan's collection. So that's a great resource as well.
Do we know of any other notable musicians who would have put on performances?
Francis Johnson was probably the biggest name that I find associated. And he's probably actually the most recognizable today because there's a lot of people who talk about Francis Johnson. He was one of the most prolific early American composers and important composers. Most of the other names are not ones people would be familiar with today. Sometimes you see the occasional repeat name of a composer, but a lot of these were sort of grassroots, written and published, and we have the primary source, and that's about it, which is really interesting to think about. What did it sound like? But I would say Johnson would probably be the most associated with these Lafayette commemorations, especially because a lot of his were for that New York event, and that was such a major stop on the tour.
Do we have any other records about how music was used in Lancaster?
Not too much. Unfortunately, we really have just the newspaper articles, but it seems to follow the same pattern. So I'm able to piece some things together for what we're going to do for our Lafayette Day. We are going to have vocal performances because we know that those were done at the school as part of his welcome when he arrives at historic Rockford, and then also during some of our vignettes with notable Lancastrians we know he met. So we are going to have vocal performances then, and then we are going to have some of the military music because we know typically that accompanied any parade kind of thing that Lafayette was doing. So there was that formula that seemed to follow. And then we are planning to do Johnson's New Cotillions. I think at Historic Rockford, I'm not sure about the ball yet. We're extrapolating from all of the primary sources of sort of that formula of what was performed when to maybe fill some of the gaps in our Lancaster record with what was typical and what a lot of groups did. But we do know about those vocal performances, so we're making sure to put some of that in there.
Anything else you want to share about Historic Rockford's Lafayette Day, which, by the way, is Monday, July 28th, 2025 from 10 till 4. You can get more details at historicrockford.org.
It's going to be exciting. We're really putting together a good program. There's going to be a lot of musicians there playing. We're not only focusing on the things written for Lafayette's event. This was a big gathering event. This was a event where people came, and it wasn't just the music that was composed for Lafayette. People would have been having parties and things like that. So we have a lot of musicians who will be playing early American music as well that wasn't just composed for Lafayette. So if you're interested in music, and particularly early American music, it won't just be these pieces that were specifically performed. It will be country dances, and it will be, I think we have about 4 music groups that focus on early American music lined up to be performing as well. So Seasons will be there. I think we have a harpist, and Forbes Road Frolics coming. We have quite a few musical groups coming, and that'll definitely be a major part of Lafayette Day.
Well, thank you so much, Christina, for sitting down with us and sharing your wealth of musical knowledge. And we can't wait for Historic Rockford's Lafayette Day.
I'm looking forward to it as well. It's going to be a great day.
Tune in next month for a brand new episode as we prepare for Lafayette's visit. For more information on Rockford's Lafayette Day, historicrockford.org/special-events. For more information on what's happening across Lancaster and Western Chester counties, go to Lafayette200pa.org. And special thanks to the music director of Ascension Lutheran Church in Willow Street, Pennsylvania, John Zielinski, for performing the songs we sampled today and that you're hearing right now. I'm Lisa Landis. Thank you so much for listening.